Hi everyone, and welcome to this week's video. This week I have a bowl blank that I picked up at Rockler, and we're going to be turning and also using dye or stain on this to bring out some of the grain on the outside of the bowl. So if you want to learn more about that and see the before and after, stick around. So as usual, I am starting with the Carter & Son bowl gouge. And also, as usual, I will link all the tools that I use and products in the video description if you want to check them out. Increasing the lathe speed after I have it trued up a little bit. And it was at about 700 RPM at this point. Just taking really light passes here. Don't want to take off too much material, but I want to make sure it has a nice smooth edge. But of course I'm going to be taking off more material down at the bottom, as you see me doing here, to make the curve of the bowl. And although a different angle, doing the same thing here, just taking off more material, working on the curve, and also working my way down to the bottom of the bowl, and we'll work on the foot. Here I'm bringing the tool rest up close to the bottom of the bowl so I can work on the bottom and the foot. This is a skew chisel, and I'm taking some light passes to flatten the bottom. And I'm going to be using a tenon on this piece, so I kept saying foot, but actually I meant it's a tenon. And it's important to make the area around the tenon where the jaws of the chuck are going to sit. It's important to make that flat and not have any roundness in it, so your bowl can be balanced when you turn it. If it's not balanced, you'll get a off-center turn or a slightly wonky bowl around the rim. I know because, well, I've done it. More passes here with the bowl gouge, push and pull cuts, some shear scraping happening there. And sanding from 80 grit to 320 grit on this piece. There'll be more sanding to come when we start the staining process. This process is a little bit unique. It's something I learned kind of by doing. I did watch other people do this on YouTube. If you haven't checked out Stuart Farini's channel, definitely check that out. I'll link it down below. And after the black stain has been applied, it looks kind of terrible, really. And I'm making it look even more terrible by sanding off some of the stain because it looks uneven and looks like I don't know what I'm doing, but I promise you it will come together if you keep watching. Using 220 grit now, just sanding a little bit more, trying to get some of the stain off. And now I'm using Midnight Blue. This is from the Intrinsic Color Collection by Hampshire Sheen. Not affiliated, but I will link them down below as well. They're based in the UK. And just using a paper towel here to kind of take off some of the stain and burnish what's staying on there, burnish it in. This is a piece of a Scotch-Brite pad here. And it doesn't look terrible at this point, but it's certainly not done. I'm going to be using 150 grit to take off a little bit of that midnight purple. And I know at this point I seem like a crazy person, but keep going back up and down in grit, etc. But I promise you, there's a rhyme and a reason. And sometimes you just have to play around with this. It's not definitely it's not a paint by number kind of thing. You have to see what works for the piece. Some of the grain and different types of wood is very different. When I do this technique, I usually use figured maple. Back to 220 grit. Sanding, instead of with the lathe on, this is the lathe off, and I'm just sanding in certain spots. On to color number 3. This is Sky Blue, also from the Intrinsic Color Collection. Applying it by hand at first, and then turn on the lathe and do one veil swoop to cover it with the Sky Blue. And you can see there now why we sanded back certain areas. And now I'm using some sanding pads in the drill to what I know it looks like. I know it looks like I'm messing it up, but this is intended. I'm not upset with the design, not trying to sand it all away. Going back to add some more Sky Blue. Using what denatured alcohol does is it takes off some of the stain, it lightens it up in some areas, also frees it of any dust. But the dark area there, I really want to get rid of some of the stain without sanding. And that's what I'm doing here. More denatured alcohol. You can see it's still coming off on the paper towel, which for me at this point is a good thing. And it's really trial and error. You just have to keep seeing what looks good, what works for you. I use the air gun a lot to either dry it or take the dust off. And after being satisfied with the outside, I start the hollowing process, which goes per usual, starting with the bowl gouge. And if you watched any of my videos before, you know that I am in love with the Carter & Son bowl gouges and all their tools. So I'm not affiliated with them, but I do talk about them because everyone needs to try their tools. In addition to trying this interior curved tool rest. This is amazing. It has made my turning better, and not only better, but safer. It is a tool that adds to your safety. Having a go with the rounded scraper, and then onto some sanding, also starting at 80 grit and working my way to a 320 grit. Hey, if you don't know already, I am getting ready to launch a course on teachable.com. It is how to get started in wood turning, everything you need to know to get started in wood turning. That's launching this Friday. You can sign up ahead of time. So go over to Teachable and check that out. There'll be a link in the video description. This is some sanding sealer. I use the Zinsser's brand sanding sealer. I know I get asked that a lot. And yes, I do apply sanding sealer over the stain once it's dried. This is some quadruple steel wool. Quadruple zero, I should say. Using to denib it. And then on to the Axe abrasive paste and then polishing paste. I have a discount code for Axe in the video description. I actually have discount codes for a few products: Axe, Starbond, Tolaboat, Ariat, and Glowforge. If you've been wanting a Glowforge and didn't get one from Santa, use the link below and you can save up to $500, depending on what model you get, anywhere between $250 and $500. Buffing off the polishing paste here. And taking it off the lathe, and now I'm going to use the Longworth chuck to take off the tenon. The only thing I do not like about using a tenon is having to do this seemingly extra step. It's not hard, it's just if you use a foot, you don't have to do this. But some bowls, some pieces call for a tenon instead of a mortise. Speaking of the Glowforge that I mentioned, I'm going to have some more projects coming up with the Glowforge incorporated into some wood turnings. I've had some in the past on the channel and people have liked them. But leave me a comment down below if you're wanting to get a Glowforge, or you have one, or you have a friend that has one. I'd like to hear what you're doing with it, or what you would do with it if you had one. Branding iron applied here, and then some sanding sealer over that. Please subscribe if you haven't done that already, especially if you made it this far.